We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
To embarrass a legend like Peyton Manning in San Diego, and Charger fans knew we were going to win. I'm telling you, the one thing we can do year in, year out is beat the Peyton Manning Colts. I don't see why this was going to be any different, or at least I didn't at that time.
It's October 2012, Broncos at Chargers. This is Remember That Game, the podcast about sporting events that take you on a journey and maybe chart the path of the zeitgeist. I'm your host, Thomas Emerick, and my guest is John Solis, whose work you may have seen at RotoViz and PlayerProfiler. For this week, we'll throw it back to an episode we recorded a few years back on the Broncos visiting San Diego and finding John Solis in attendance for Peyton Manning's return.
It's been a painful couple days as I've re-exposed myself to watching the Chargers. That's true. You know, I think most of your guests probably do a little bit of homework, and I didn't want to be caught unprepared. So I watched the game again. It's on YouTube. Full game. ESPN footage, Monday Night Football, right there streaming. Didn't have to log in or anything. And yeah, it was just as painful as being there in person. Actually, probably more painful because you get a much better view of everything when you're watching it on TV or online. So thank you for that.
You had a fresh Phillip Rivers jersey on with the right color of Chargers blue.
Powder blue, a classic.
Yeah, at that time, the powder blue was reigning in the AFC West. Chargers had won 5 of the previous 8 division titles, and then Peyton Manning comes to Denver that offseason. Phillip Rivers says he wants Peyton Manning in the division. He doesn't feel like it's right that team could win the AFC West with 9 wins, and he knows bringing Peyton Manning in will definitely make that a higher bar. And the first half, you probably felt the Chargers were still the big dogs there.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it was very, very easy to be confident in the Chargers, especially in the pre-Peyton AFC West. Can I tell you a joke?
Oh, yeah.
Is it okay if it's a little bit of a crude joke?
Yeah, whatever's about to come.
So Thomas, how do you get a Raiders fan to stop masturbating so damn much?
How do you do it?
Well, you paint a lightning bolt on his genitals, and then he won't beat it for 10 years.
Oh my God, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that was the spirit of the times, man. All we did was win.
It reminds me of both the line in The Wire where Landsman talks about how he couldn't jerk off because he keeps thinking about freaking McNulty, and the episode of Flight of the Conchords where David Bowie comes to them in a dream and convinces them to paint a lightning bolt on the side of his wiener. So it's a fruitful ground for comedy, that specific painting activity.
You had, I mean, this is almost rehearsed. How you had those 2 specific references queued up and ready to roll. That is uncanny. But to answer your question, actually, let me give you a little more context, okay? So there was one thing I knew about the Chargers at that time and in the years leading up to that game, which is even when we're bad, we can beat the Colts. Even when we're bad, we can beat Peyton Manning. Now, I had this idea in my head that Peyton Manning on the Colts had never beaten the Chargers. And that's not true. I looked up his record. And in his 13 years on the Colts, he beat the Chargers one time. But otherwise, whenever San Diego showed up, it was a dismantling. Like, there's this beautiful interception. The most beautiful interception you've ever seen, right? You can picture it now. The Antonio Cromartie, full extension. Better than Odell's catch. Better than Odell's catch. Because Eli wanted Odell to catch it, okay? Antonio Cromartie gave the full Odell treatment to Peyton Manning, snatched it out of the air. Incredible. And that was one of 6 interceptions on Peyton Manning that game. Sports fans are superstitious, and one of the things I could hang my hat on is we're going to beat Peyton Manning, okay? And all due respect to Peyton, the sheriff, the legend, I mean, the guy was coming off of a broken neck, right? Like, this was his first time playing the Chargers after missing an entire year in 2011. So I anticipated a win. I certainly did, to the point, and I was a very, very, very broke law school student at that time, and I was so confident that this would be a great game that I took my now fiancée, Maggie, to her first NFL game, Monday Night Football, Broncos at Chargers in San Diego. It was supposed to be one for the ages.
That'll be on the thread for the episode. Yeah, you posted that great picture on Twitter. It looked like a halcyon day in San Diego. On the broadcast, Gruden and Tirico kept talking about how amazing San Diego is. Picture of people watching the Monday night game on a big screen on the pier. And then also speaking to that, they had the neck injury. The Broncos were 2-3 at this point, and the Chargers were 3-2. Home for the Chargers, and Vegas had it at Pick'em, so maybe the market was a little bit wise to that. This Broncos team still could be very dangerous, but they had trailed by more than 20 points in 3 of their first 5 games, would go down by more than 20 again this game. At one point in the broadcast, this really leaps out. It's crazy now. Tirico talks about Elway. Tirico says, the leap of faith here, the confidence to turn the whole thing around. Get rid of Tebow, trade him off, bring in Peyton Manning, and really, John, let's be honest, turn the offense over to him. Now, the idea that would be a leap of faith seemed like a normal thing at that time. In retrospect, it's crazy because we know his neck ended up kind of fucking up his fingers and ability to throw, but not enough.
Not enough to keep the sheriff down. Those of you who play fantasy football will remember it was 2013, the year after this game, where Peyton truly unleashed the beast, unlike any offense we've ever seen in fantasy history. But there was some question in 2012 as to who this person was and what this was going to mean for this game in particular. Absolutely. You know, it made me laugh when I was rewatching this game. So spoiler alert for the listeners, if you don't remember the shape of this game as intimately as Thomas and I do, the Chargers are up 24-0 coming out of the half. An unheard of lead. In fact, the biggest deficit Peyton Manning would ever face coming out of a half in his career. And that's not comeback wins. Everybody knows he came back and win, and it was devastating or spectacular, depending on who you ask. But the shape of this game was a Chargers stomp out, which is what I had paid for, which is what I had hoped for. I went so far down that tirade, Thomas. I've lost track of myself. Why was I providing this context? Why was this important? I'm serious.
Because the Chargers had 24-0 lead, and they're looking at 4-2. The Broncos, in their Peyton Manning quote experiment, were about to open up 2-4.
That's right. So they said at one point to Gruden, they said, the impact of first half like this, it doesn't just matter for this game. It could matter at the end of the season. The implication being, wow, this is a serious AFC West rivalry. And, who wins Chargers-Broncos could determine who's going to the playoffs this year, 2012. So yeah, the stakes were high, despite being a Game 6.
Previous 8 years, all except one, the odd Matt Castle Chiefs year, 7 titles that mostly went to the Chargers, but a couple went to the Broncos. And usually it came down to those teams at the end of the season. And at halftime, it was like, if the Chargers start a 4-2, that's a deficit. Basically already spoiled it, but the Broncos win this game and the next 10 games.
They didn't lose rest of the regular season. They won out.
The sheriff came back this night.
This was it. I was reading the comments in the YouTube video with the full stream, and someone said, on this day, Peyton Manning became a Bronco. And I read that, I'm like, lame. But that's what that meant to those fans. Gosh, this shirt I'm wearing is almost Broncos orange. What is wrong with me?
And much like Chris Harris, you've switched allegiances in this rivalry. This would be you could say the day Harris became a national name. The Chargers went at him early. They thought they could get at him with Robert Meacham, who's kind of over the hill at this point. They thought they could get at him with Eddie Royal, and that wouldn't work either. This group of Chargers receiving options, Vjax was gone at this point.
Yep.
Gates maybe nearing the decline, and then Malcolm Floyd. Do you think this is more closer to the top or the bottom of the Chargers' arsenals?
Oh, man. I mean, listening to that murderer's row you just listed, Robert Meacham? No, this you could say this was the worst receiving squad Phillip Rivers ever had. I think Vincent Jackson left in 2011 or 2010. He'd been in Tampa Bay at least for this season, and he was our number one guy for a moment. But even then, he was good for 1,100 yards, right? We didn't have a Keenan Allen type at that time. But Rivers, for his career, at least in San Diego, he was the guy who spreads it around. So it wasn't so uncommon to have a bunch of bums with between 500 and 800 yards apiece. But in hindsight, this group stunk. And Antonio Gates, I think this was his 10th season at this point. So he was a few years removed from the 10 touchdown, 1,200 yard affairs of seasons past. But I mean, he played 6 more years after this. He still had something in the tank, but he was not the dominant force that we knew and loved for so long. So no, Rivers, this was not a top-tier Chargers offensive weapon squad for me.
Even getting up there a little bit, Antonio Gates still the best receiving option there. Not quite at the old man YMCA ball part of his career. I mean, he could freeze defensive backs like running that 10-yard dig or an out, and he did beat Mike Adams 3 times for 50 yards in the first half. They started getting in shoving matches. You could see the Broncos were getting even more rowdy as the deficit went from Chargers 10-0 to 17-0 to 24-0. Peyton Manning has to watch his special teams units fumble away 2 fumbles before he can get the ball back. How enjoyable was that to see Peyton Manning tilt his face off, and were you able to pretend for a moment that the Chargers hold on to the lead? So
this part I remember, and I remember this from being there live. So my fiance Maggie is from Nebraska, so she's a Huskers fan, but they don't have a professional NFL team, and she was very open to having the Chargers be her team. And as the ambassador to the Chargers, long before we went to this game, I would warn her, hey, Chargers can throw away a game any second. Any second, Phillip Rivers can throw a game away. That is the risk you run in rooting for the Chargers. But by the time, what was the last score in the first half for the Chargers? Was it like a 10-yarder to Gates, 15-yarder to Gates?
Yeah, I think Gates beat someone to the inside 15 yards, yeah.
This is after Jammer ran his interception in for a touchdown. I looked over to Maggie and I said, you know what? We got this one.
Dead.
You know what?
You're dead.
We got this one. And we were out there really in the company of many dejected Broncos fans, which was great. Because they were so dejected. They would toss their hands in the air in anger and hide their heads. And they would look back over their shoulder at Maggie and I and say, this one's ugly, guys. That kind of humble, tail between your legs kind of behavior you do when you're on the road and your team is losing. It was just the best first half of football I've ever witnessed. Absolutely.
Quentin Jammer play where Peyton Manning's on this new team, and I think it was their fourth receiver. I want to say Matthew Slater, but I think it's Matthew Willis. He has a sight adjustment. Peyton Manning wants to throw. He doesn't see the same thing as Peyton does, so it ends up being a pick six. Peyton Manning probably Cody Latimer's him because I've never heard of that guy since. And next thing you know, 24-zip vibe in the stadium from the broadcast. Watching that, I can't remember a Chargers game from the last decade that was this loud while the other quarterback was taking the ball.
It was like being a real fan of a real team. That's what it felt like. You know what the 12th man gets to experience every game. What Chiefs fans. Thomas, why do I think of you as a Chiefs fan? Are you?
No, I'm a Giants fan.
Oh, you're a Giant. Shit, good for you, man. I love the Giants. That's a fun team.
Yeah, we're gonna be fun and bad for a good 10, 15 years, I think.
Hey, man, fun and bad is the way to do it. But to embarrass a legend like Peyton Manning in San Diego, and Charger fans knew we were gonna win. I'm telling you, the one thing we can do year in, year out is beat the Peyton Manning Colts. I don't see why this was going to be any different, or at least I didn't at that time. So yeah, if you wanted to call that the last pure moment of happiness I had as a Charger fan, like that 30 seconds before that half, that would be accurate. That would be at least fair. Yeah.
Chargers end up missing the playoffs this season. The following season, losing at Denver in the playoffs. And then Denver and KC claim Super Bowls. The Chargers, the closest they get is that game where Tom Brady hands it off like 50 times and they can't do anything about it a couple of years ago. So a lot of sad. So yeah, you go from perennial division favorite and most of the time winner to this turning point here in October on Monday night. Beautiful night, great jersey color scheme on the field and in the stands. It's a beautiful thing. And then the sheriff came to Denver and changed things a bit.
You know, you talk about jerseys in the stands. When you asked me if I wanted to talk about this game, it prompted me to revisit some of my own pictures. And I took pictures like people would have done in 2012 on their Motorola Razr phone. No, I probably had an iPhone at that. I digress. But the audience there, it's not all orange. There's some orange, but there's a lot of blue. There's a lot of blue, powder blue, navy blue, a little bit of Chargers camo because San Diego, they've always got navy vibes on everything. But there were a lot of fans there. And it's a joke now that the Chargers only play away games, even in Los Angeles. But it didn't used to be that way.
Yeah, the decibels don't lie. And that game, watching that, you could tell when Peyton Manning had the ball, it was a whole different scene than the last couple of years in that makeshift high school field they're playing at, or I think it might be a public park.
It's just a park. There's not even any bleachers. There's several GoPro holes, ladies walking their dogs.
Odds are, yeah. But yeah, the Chargers had really taken the mantle during this period from the Patriots as the thorn in Peyton Manning's side. He got his own monkey off his back, but with that comeback against the Patriots in the AFC title, call back to episode 7 with Mark Schofield, Chargers had assumed that role as the Peyton troller. They knocked him out in the playoffs a couple times. Once with was it Billy with Rivers' backup coming in during the game in the playoffs. But I remember that 07 run. Rivers hurts his knee against the Colts. Yeah, because Colts had the 2 seed. Rivers hurts his knee in Indy, and then Rivers plays at the 17-0 Pats in the AFC title on a blown ACL. Mm-hmm. And so they trolled after Peyton exercised the demons in 06. Chargers knock him out in 07. I think they knock Peyton Manning out again in San Diego in a wild card game, right?
In one of these games, Darren Sproles put the entire team on his back. That's what resonates for me. But I don't have the recall that you seem to have, Thomas. This is impressive. And these aren't even your teams.
I think it might be 2008 because I think there was a year the Chargers went 8-8, but they won the AFC West, so that's why Philip Rivers is like in 2012. He's like, well, I'm glad Peyton's here. Now we can win the division with more than 9 wins. And he's like, yeah, that'll be good. That'll be good for the division's reputation. Yeah. Let's go.
There we go.
Chargers go 8-8, but they get the home game for winning the AFC West. Peyton's Colts come to San Diego, and Sproles just leaves everyone in the dust.
I love it. Love Darren Sproles. He's the original Darren Sproles type back.
Yeah, he is an archetype. Not everyone it gets to be an archetype. There's very few people, and Darren Sproles is one of those. That's pretty special. And this is kind of a weird Broncos roster, too. You could define a Peyton Manning era as the Tammy era, which is the one right before and after a spine injury. And Tammy's this like serviceable tight end. He gets a lot of mileage out of in Denver, and then Tammy and Stokely come to the Broncos in 2012 and are key parts of that of that early going in that Broncos run. I try to have a couple friends guess, like, hey, who were the skill position starters for the Broncos Monday night 2012? And none of them got each of these guys. Willis McGahee, Demaryius Thomas, Jacob Tamme, Joel Dreesen, Virgil Green. That was the first offensive snap for the Broncos.
I would, you could have given me 10 hours. I wouldn't have come up with those guys. Willis McGahee in my brain is a Miami Dolphin, which I don't think that's accurate, right?
Yeah. Willis McGahee retired in 1995.
Right. Where's No Sean? Is No Sean in the mix somewhere in there?
Such a weird I guess record-setting era, like 2013 through 2015. So starting with the record-breaking season, ending with the Super Bowl. Like these are the names we remember. Emmanuel Sanders, Julius Thomas, Noshawn Moreno. A lot of us, including myself, remember spending a lot of auction dollars on Monte Ball.
Yep. God.
Wes Welker, and this is pre all of them. It's pre Welker. It's Stokely. You do get Eric Decker there, who was. I don't think he was there for the Super Bowl, but he was there for the record-breaking season. So Eric Decker was there. He just didn't play on that very first play. But
right.
Yeah, a very weird mesh point in Peyton Manning's career where he just kind of gets a little bit of the Colts gang back together, and then has this other weird mishmash of players, and sometimes even going 3 tight ends to start a game. Like even the most talented players, they were relatively unknown, Eric Decker and Demaryius Thomas. And then you have these indie retreads. Were you really that afraid of Peyton's weapons that day?
I mean, going in, there was just no fear because, like I said, there's a prophecy, a smoking, swirling prophecy inside a crystal ball on some witch's shelf somewhere, and it said that the Chargers are going to beat Peyton Manning no matter what, and that was what I believed. And until I researched this history, I believed they had always beaten him until this game. I thought they were undefeated against Peyton Manning. So even if he had the best offensive weapons in the league, I wouldn't have had an ounce of fear going into that game. But no, especially I know who Demaryius Thomas was, but he didn't scare me, right? Like he was still the guy being tossed to by Peyton Manning, the guy destined to lose. So it was pure confidence going in, and the events of the first half only bolstered that confidence.
Thomas considered really raw, but a talented receiver coming out of Georgia Tech. Suddenly, in a few weeks of regular season with Peyton Manning and an off season of work with him, he begins the second half, corner post, burns Quentin Jammer, shrugs off the hit from Eric Weddle, touchdown, suddenly only down 17. It's 24-7. Where you're starting to rethink how dead in the water the Broncos were.
On their first score, I realized that it was over. Truly. Because when I turned to Maggie as we entered the first half and I told her that she could relax and we had won it, there was a voice that said, "You've gone too far. You've gone too far." And that's the other prophecy. That's the one I didn't mention yet. A Charger fan who is overconfident is destined to be disappointed. Destined. And this one has never been wrong, because no San Diego team has ever won anything. Ever. In any sport for all of time. So, that was not just a warning that maybe we were overconfident. That was the sign. That was the sign. And true to form. I mean, we didn't score another point the rest of the game. And there were many more back-breaking interceptions to be thrown by the king of back-breaking interceptions, Phillip Rivers. So it was just kind of like buckle up at that point. Buckle up. No, not an ounce of confidence after that first Broncos score. It was gone.
Yeah, I mean, seeing how open Demaryius Thomas was able to get added an element of route running to that game. You're getting ready for the entire decade to shift for these two franchises 24/7, and very quickly it's 24-14. Randy McMichael fumbles. The Chargers do a good job of pushing guys, Denver Broncos players, right as they're about to get to the ball. So instead of able to pick it up, they just squirt it out further. But then Phillip Rivers fumbles a few plays later, punches right to Tony Carter, picks it up quickly, makes his way 60 yards into the end zone.
Scoop and score.
Yeah.
Scoop and score. Yeah, that's how they called it. It was a scoop and a score. And if you were there, and maybe it comes through on video, the stadium is deflated at that point. And Broncos fans, and I can picture this in my mind's eye, clear as day, they're dancing, like in front of me, dancing, standing in their seats, dancing. One guy, he's doing a sea walk. But yeah, we got Denver Broncos doing the sea walk in their chairs in celebration. It was, it was humiliating. It was humbling and humiliating. They weren't even ahead yet, but they just knew. Yeah.
The confidence to crit walk all over your asses in your stadium. You won 5 of the past 8 AFC West titles, and they're already like, yep, things are changing.
Yep.
New sheriff in town.
New sheriff. The new sheriff is the old sheriff, and he's in town, and you're gonna lose. That's what that told me.
Calling Peyton the sheriff is something I went from hating to loving and back to hating, I think 9 times in different cycles. And I'm back into the liking it part after that broadcast.
It's a cool nickname. It's a fine nickname. He looks vaguely like the character Woody from Toy Story.
He has a head for a Western.
Yeah.
Put a cowboy hat on that guy. I think it works. So you're at 24-14. The ball rolls to Tony Carter almost like it's choreographed, how just in synchronization it is. And he's in the end zone immediately. Phillip Rivers is starting to make Phillip Rivers faces on the sideline. Yeah. And that can go either way. That can mean comeback or things fall apart. Well, in this instance, Peyton Manning hits the go had scored at Brandon Stokely on a fade from the slot. Screen to Decker. They run like a bubble out of like a bunch formation inside the 10-yard line. Assign to everyone the shit they're going to run the next year and like win a bunch of people fantasy leagues. You get down to the 5-yard line. No, Peyton's padding those stats. Like it's gonna be fantasy bonanza for 2 years. Just trust us. And plays like some of the stuff they're drawing up in the red zone show the firepower there. Yeah, the Broncos don't come out of the red zone with a field goal. It's instead 4 touchdowns. Next thing you know, it's 28-24. Are you still in the stadium?
We're still there. Now again, for context, it's not like we got to go to games often. And sitting where we were sitting was a big deal. So on the off chance the universe was going to be merciful, no, we stayed, we waited, we endured the dancing and the cheering and the high-fiving. And again, I tell you, that stadium was blue, okay, with some orange. but Maggie and I were in a Broncos infested area. That didn't make staying easier, but no, we stayed. We took our medicine, and what a perfect Chargers fandom lesson, right? Like, you got overconfident. They shit all over you, and they danced all over you, and they sea-walked all over you, and you just had to take it, and you went home broke and angry.
Yeah.
That's the experience.
And you enjoyed it before it was gone, not just the team leaving, but the fans getting outnumbered, that part of the era.
Yeah.
You were there for one of the final great real Charger nights.
Yeah, it was, in hindsight, I'm glad I went. And listen, this whole exercise in revisiting this game, for one, it made me remember, sincerely, I used to love that team. Like, love the Chargers. And not because they were good, because they weren't. Even when they were good, they were bad. But I loved having a team. And it's one of the only things I had in common with my dad. And now we talk about fantasy, which is nice. But we used to talk about the Chargers. It was so... I was so much the Charger fan that the fact that Peyton Manning was there was meaningless to me. And I was pissed after the game, like I always am after a Chargers loss. It's only in hindsight that I can say now, it's like, hey, wow, I watched Peyton Manning's most substantial comeback ever. I saw that. I didn't appreciate it at the time. It made me very mad at the time. But with the benefit of hindsight, hey, there's a Hall of Famer. That's cool. And that's not something I'll maybe get to say about any of the Chargers I saw that day.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Pretty magical. Like, this guy just had his spine fused, and the first three games, I mean, I remember in that Atlanta game, after the Atlanta game earlier a couple of weeks before, there's talk about whether he can really get it done. He doesn't have as much feeling in his fingertips.
Yeah.
They go down big in that game, and he kept getting picked because there's throws, deep digs, just couldn't get enough mustard on it. And then this Chargers game, you see him work out how to get around that. And putting different players in situations where they could just break the Chargers defense. They're giving him trouble with moving Eric Weddle around, and then next thing you know, they're doing these bunches and getting Weddle to bite up in one area while Peyton's really trying to hit this other area. And you see him just kind of figure out a defense over the course of one half, and then throw all the answers in the second half in a way that only requires throws he can still make.
Yep.
Just seeing him put the puzzle pieces together for the new state of his mortal coil was quite an incredible thing watching this game.
The Padres had the benefit of a much older Greg Maddux, and he was, as you say, struggling with the mustard and adapting his pitching style to accommodate his older arm. And it felt kind of like that, at least now, in hindsight. The great ones adapt, don't they? They make the most of their tools.
Yeah, and the Broncos screen game seemed like it took the NFL by storm that year too. They're doing all sorts of crazy stuff and out of different formations. And I remember John Gruden was talking about how there's gonna be way more bunch, way more empty formation than in Indy. And I guess Mike McCoy, who would end up being a Chargers coach the following year, the Chargers get whipped twice in a 6-week span by the Broncos. And then they hire the guy who's offensive coordinator there with Peyton.
Yep.
They draw up all these quick hitting short throws to get, Eric Decker or Demaryius Thomas or Willis McGahee a chance to catch the ball and run. Even Willis McGahee has a 30-yard catch because Peyton Manning gets everyone sucked up into one area, and then the entire left side of the field is open for Willis McGahee to just gallop. And then suddenly you forget that Tim Tebow was even there the year prior.
I loved that Tebow playoff run just because it made so many football people so angry because Tim Tebow is lousy. He's lousy. He's lousy in every capacity, but he had the magic, and that made people furious. And as an observer, I was like, I like that. Give me all the Tebow mania I can handle.
Are you still technically a Chargers fan or more of an observer?
No. 0% Chargers fan. In fact, if you wanted to correctly categorize my fandom right now, I am the biggest fan of whoever is playing the Chargers this week. I have never rooted for any team as much as I hate the Los Angeles Chargers. This year, okay, so the first year they left, I was actually a Giants fan. Tried that on. Yeah, well, because, you start thinking, who are the players I like? And I'm sure you've thought about this and discussed this at length, but, I like an underdog, but I also like a winner. I love Eli Manning, okay? And we'll just diverge a little bit from the main story here. I hated Eli Manning for a moment, and you know why, right? You know why.
Oh, yeah. He, for some reason, didn't want to go to such a lovely town.
Yeah, well. Eli and his dad had this idea that the Spanos family didn't know how to run an organization or treat its players. Had this crazy idea of that. And it hurt. And I will tell you this, I don't think Eli did beat the Chargers, at least not for the first, 10, however many years of his career. Like, we cursed him for that. But he was right. The ownership revealed itself in the years to come. And part of my Giants fandom was embracing that. Who's the opposite? Who's the opposite of what I was doing before? Eli. And Eli, the Giants. I mean, the giant killers themselves, right? The ultimate underdogs. It was a really fun team to root for, and then they traded Odell and lost me. I love Odell Beckham Jr. But this year, we're actually, me and my Charger buddies, ex-Charger buddies, we're Colts fans. One of the YouTube comments, tell me if this is a good comment or trash. He said that the portraits of Peyton Manning in the halls of Indy must haunt Phillip Rivers. Oh, no, that's a comment on a video where Rivers got his ass whipped by Peyton Manning. And that's fair within the context of that video. But no, what's Rivers' record against Peyton Manning? 7-2 in his career. It's not much. Career for career. Well, okay, let's not put it that way.
I think the Broncos numbers must have evened it out a little bit, though, right? Those 3-4 years of the Broncos.
Did they just beat us every time in 2014 and 2015? Actually, probably, right?
I'm gonna look it up right now.
Yeah, let's look it up. Why? Why would you bring that up? but let me. While you're looking that up, I don't think Rivers versus Manning is a thing, right? I don't think Rivers is someone who is haunted by Peyton Manning more than anybody is.
They seem like to be buddies.
Right. They're colleagues. Peyton is a living legend. I don't think Rivers would compare himself to Manning, even if it is true that he has more wins than losses against Manning, which I'm still going to guess is true. I'm still going to guess that's true.
Okay, so in 2012, the Chargers got swept, so that's going to be 2 in Manning's. In 2013, they lose at Denver in the playoffs. They win in Denver in December that season, but they split during the regular season, so it's going to be 1-4 after 2 seasons. And 2014, They lose to Denver at home and away. Oh, no. Anyways, I'm not going to go any further. But we can just pretend that the Broncos part didn't happen, though. We can pretend the Broncos part didn't exist, and then that guy's owned on YouTube.
If you look only at the Colts situation, that YouTube guy just got dismantled.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the portraits, if they're in the Colts hallways, they're going to be of Peyton on the Colts, and you own that version of Peyton Manning, so he's owned.
Bingo. Case closed.
That's fine.
Manning fan 42069.
Yeah, you're gonna get 2 thumbs down from a couple accounts. Get ready for that.
Most definitely. I am looking forward actually to seeing what Rivers can do. The reason for our recent Colts fandom is we could not in good faith root for Rivers while he was a Charger. That was just something we discussed and agreed on. But I love Phillip Rivers for all his faults, for all his nearly endless faults. That's my quarterback.
Faults make him great in a way.
Do they?
Like the stuff where on the broadcast they're like, Phillip Rivers is still mad because 2 plays ago they called a false start on him, and so after he completes the 3rd down, he said he's yelling "didn't need it" at the refs.
Wow.
That level of troll. I mean, he's the consummate micro troll. Sometimes macro, but like he slips little things in at everyone that I would think would make the game more fun if I was playing. If someone's just wild like that.
I think he gets under the skin of a lot of players, and I remember Jay Cutler on many occasions wanted to physically fight Phillip Rivers. But I'll say this, Rivers keeps it clean. He's like a Will Smith or a Sinbad. Like he's cocky and chippy, but he's never calling you anything worse than a crumb bum or a gosh dang dingus. He probably wouldn't call anyone a dingus, I suppose. But no. So imagine my relief to be able to root for really my favorite quarterback, Phillip Rivers, on a totally separate team. And then on top of it, I went to school in Indiana. In fact, I went to school with Cody Latimer, who you mentioned earlier.
Oh.
So I've got the Colts connection. I got my quarterback, Phillip Rivers. I mean, this is going to be my best season of football. Fingers crossed. We have football, right? In a long time.
Yeah. And now behind what many consider to be the best offensive line in the NFL and Indy, there was a stretch where that Chargers line in the 2000s was considered one of the best, with Marcus McNeil at left tackle, Nick Hardwick at center. It kind of falls apart around 2010, 2011. McNeil's falls over the age cliff a little bit. They bring in Jared Gaither to kind of shore things up down the stretch in 2011. He goes out in training camp. So they end up rolling that season with left tackle Michael Harris, who is an undrafted free agent rookie, which never happens, them starting week 1. I think only once since 2016 has that happened. So they try to roll with that. And then Jeremy Clary at right tackle. Doomerville and Von Miller end up being a problem.
Those guys good?
Yeah, they combine for 10 pressures. I think Doomerville gets at least 2 sacks and at least like 1 strip sack. Gets in Rivers' face on a couple of the turnovers. How much do you go to bat for Rivers on the idea that he's under attack?
Okay, a lot to unpack there. First, there's something I have to mention. During this game in 2012, and for years after, Von Miller was on steroids.
Is that can we confirm that? Can we corroborate?
I'm putting it out there, okay? I don't know about Elvis Doomerville, but those guys hang out all the time, okay? It wouldn't surprise me if they were both injecting testosterone into their butts.
Well, they're just, what if they're just not saying he did it, but what if they're just evening things out for Sean Merriman?
Oh, lights out.
Call it square.
Sean Merriman at one point had a very aggressive Twitter follower campaign. Whatever bot he had running his account was aggressively following all of these Chargers accounts and sending the same canned DM to that individual. I didn't realize this at this time. I was a part of the 619 Chargers Club on Twitter. And Sean Merriman followed me and even private messaged me, but really it was a robot. But yeah, no, that guy was absolutely on steroids. So as to the Chargers line, I've got this theory. I don't know if it can be measured. I don't know if you've thought about this, but my theory is on an offensive line, the more players you have returning from the previous year, the more cohesive that line is, the more effective that line is, the more fantasy points and real-life points you're going to get. This is my personal theory. It's called the Solis offensive line system.
Hey, that's a good name.
Thank you. We can discuss it later if you like. But based solely on that, I'd have to say, having a UDFA playing basically his fifth ever game of football against Von Miller with zonked out on enough testosterone to make him see red, that's not a recipe for success. The Chargers, who was the last big lineman they invested in? Was it DJ Fluker?
Okung was, relative to what they're typically spending, and then they usually don't go first round offensive, like they typically avoid first round offensive line, but they did go Forrest Lamb with a second round pick, which is should have been pretty valuable, but he can't stay healthy. Mike Pouncey.
I liked Fluker. He never got enough respect in San Diego. He got a little bit of it in Seattle. Where is he now? Is he a Raven now? DJ Fluker?
Fluker is now, I think he's going to be starting right guard for the Ravens, replacing Marshall Yonda. Some shoes to fill there.
Do you think it's necessary for a guard to be versatile? Because, Fluker was as mauling a run blocker as I had ever seen. That man can run block. I don't know how he is at protecting Phillip Rivers. I don't know. That's not something I can measure. But I thought he was good at that, and I was sad we got rid of him because he was a great run blocker. What do you think?
Yeah, it seemed to me pass protection, it isn't his strongest suit, but at the same time, every component of his game is going to be way better than the median Chargers offensive line starter over the past several years. Mm-hmm. So you're figuring out how to fill a right guard spot that you've usually screwed up, and that's not an ideal place to be. Yeah, I would look into the Chargers offensive line continuity numbers over the years and see how that kind of traces to how many times people like Ryan Matthews just hit the line of scrimmage just like a brick wall every time. Yeah, I think Ryan Matthews in this game, 22 carries for 74 yards. I think Danny Carter on Twitter said they had the typical Ryan Matthews number. I remember dying on that hill, loving the production down the stretch in 2010, spending a bunch of auction bucks in 2011. By 2012, he's dead to me. But
wait. When did he get 1,600 yards from scrimmage? Was that 2010?
I remember actually trading for him and then realizing he can't get past line of scrimmage without getting hit by a linebacker or defensive tackle.
No, and health was unfortunately an issue for him always. I thought Philadelphia was going to be a nice resurgence for Ryan Matthews. I always liked him. Yeah,
it was always ball security and injuries. If you just shore both those up, and to me, it seemed like it was pretty good. Broke his clavicle on the first season carry. He also got in a car accident that off season. I don't know if those are related, but I'm going to chalk that one up to bad luck more than.
You can't. You couldn't predict his car accident on the way to Krispy Kreme on Rosecrans.
Oh man,
San Diego listeners.
That's some Chargers stuff to happen. Only the Chargers. Yeah, in the second half, Chargers go down. Rivers tries to go at Chris Harris a couple too many times. He runs the route for Eddie Royal on a 3rd and 7, gets the pick, and then does it again on Royal, which actually I went to high school in the same district as Royal. Really like a lot of stuff he did with the Broncos, but this day with the Chargers, he was, I think he had been injured in camp, was new to the team, didn't have as much coordination with Rivers. Doomerville got in Rivers' face on an out route, so he couldn't get a great view on it. But at that point, you have to know this Chris Harris guy is terrorizing you. Just hold it and go somewhere else. He throws it. Harris takes it to the house. Is that where you walk out of the building?
So full disclosure, we stayed till the end.
Nice.
We stayed till the end. But if someone were to walk out after another ill-fated challenge, an ego-driven challenge of Chris Harris, that would be a great time to do it. But that's Phillip Rivers football, isn't it? You know, you've just identified it. Like, I will not be beaten by any man 2 times. Like, that's Phillip Rivers for you. Yeah, you got me the last time, you dang chowderhead. But listen here, you silly old dingus. This one's connecting to Eddie Royal. Did you like how? Because I know you rewatched this just like I did. Did you like how in the beginning they were trying to frame it as an Eddie Royal revenge game?
Yeah.
Like we're not out here talking about a revenge game for that guy necessarily, or maybe it could have gone different. Maybe he could have blown up on special teams in that game, but that was not to be.
I also remember at the start of the game, I think Chris Harris this is his first game he really popped off. He was like kind of solid up to that point, a second-year player, a lot of part-time his first season. In this Chargers game, Rivers goes at him early, and the announcers say like, hey, Tracy Porter's out, so they're going to test this guy. You know, it's still a pretty good secondary. That Tony Carter, who made some plays that day, also ended up with a pick off a pass to Robert Meacham, another person who had a rough run with the Chargers. And, and Champ Bailey was there too.
Oh, yeah.
It's still a pretty good secondary. Down Malcolm Floyd pretty well that night. That pick 6 by Chris Harris makes it 35-24. Broncos pull it out. A couple quotes from after the game. Peyton Manning, he talks about how they interviewed him and Rand Stokely because they had like a nice hand signal at the line on that play where Stokely scores on the fade. Peyton says, I'll take Stokely over any slot receiver in the league. Wes Welker's great too. And I'm like, wait, he hasn't even played with Wes Welker. Oh, that's a signal. Okay.
Yeah, that was some tampering.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of tampering, Peyton.
Why would I do it on live television? They're like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
He's a great slot receiver, and you're just stating the fact. Very savvy move from Peyton. Truly is the sheriff. I also love how Tony Carter picks it up to scoop and score, make it 24-14. Obviously, Peyton Manning knows, okay, the announcers or the broadcast crew is cutting to me. And I think when that happens, even though he's about to go out in the field in 2 seconds, he starts warming up even harder. I know he does.
Yeah, that's a very Peyton move, isn't it? Ever the showman, ever aware of the cameras. A lot of respect in hindsight, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, as far as building up the drama, building up the television event, no one does it like Peyton. And also John Gruden on the broadcast underscoring how wild it is that Peyton Manning's coming back from this. Gruden's like, hey, I had great players, Sterling Sharp and Rich Gannon suffered neck injuries. It was over. This is crazy that he's back. This isn't happening.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to drill down. So do you remember an exact moment where you said, going to become kind of a floating fan of football? I can't take it with the Chargers.
Sure. I don't know if I can hone in on a specific instance in time, but when it became clear that they were leaving San Diego and specifically they were going to Los Angeles, that's when I turned in my card. So if they had left and gone to a city without a football team, let me ask you this: had the Rams had just left St. Louis, right? They were already in LA, I want to say, by 2015, 2016.
Yeah, I think they were a year before the Chargers.
If the Chargers had gone to St. Louis and been the St. Louis Chargers, I would have no problem having that be my team and continue rooting for Rivers and then Melvin Gordon and Keenan Allen and all my favorites. I would have no issue with that. Really, as a San Diegan, as the
rivalry a little bit with LA.
Yeah, I mean, you would be hard pressed to get an Angelino to acknowledge that it's even a rivalry because, as I've said, LA teams have championships. San Diego teams do not in any sport and never have. We've been second-class citizens both in the sporting world and otherwise. All of us who went to undergrad in San Diego have friends from LA. It's like your partner leaving you in a divorce and going to shack up with your worst enemy. It's unforgivable. It's inexcusable. If they'd gone anywhere on earth other than LA, I'd still probably be a Charger fan right now. But once it became clear that's where they were going, I had to pack my bags.
So a Chargers fan who has become a Colts fan, are you ready emotionally for this? Phillip Rivers in the Colts uniform. Is this the most excited you've been for a football team?
Okay. So I'm not going to pretend it compares to the glory days of the San Diego Chargers, right? But since the Chargers have left, rooting for Phillip Rivers in my college state of Indiana, I feel a connection, probably, for the first time. I've been a Giants fan in the years that have passed. I've been a Cleveland Browns fan. And it's been fun, but there's been no connection, right? There's been no connection. Like, I guess I eat a lot of chili. That's vaguely an Ohio thing. Go Baker. I eat chili, go Baker.
Yeah, we don't even know if Baker eats chili.
Yeah, he probably doesn't even eat chili, right? I got engaged in New York, right? I was a Giants fan. Hey, I got engaged in New York. I'm a New Yorker. But you traded Odell, so what's the point? So for the first time, hey, I went to school in Indiana. I love Phillip Rivers. This feels like my team. This feels I can invest a little. So, yeah, emotionally, I'm very prepared, and it feels almost authentic for the first time in 4 years.
Yeah, and in the halls of Peyton Manning, it comes full circle.
It certainly does.
This has been another episode of Remember That Game. Please rate, review, subscribe, and check out more episodes.